Mr. Yi, thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much.
Is Macedonia on one hand moving away from state capture, and on other, why is Reinhard Priebe in its new report warning that mistakes from the past must not repeat and one state capture be replaced with other?
Well, first, thank you very much for having me on the program. And let me begin by saying that the United States and Macedonia are strategic partners, and we have been working very closely together for the past 25 years towards our shared goal of seeing Macedonia fully integrated in European and Euro-Atlantic institutions with a prosperous and stable and secure future. And we're very glad that those efforts continue. And with regard to your question, I think we should acknowledge that a lot has happened in the last year since the report that you referred to was issued. There have been elections, of course, in December. There's been formation of a new government. That new government has made very clear its commitment to reform, has issued even an elaborate plan on its priorities for reforms, and is working very closely with the United States and the European Union, other international partners, to achieve those reforms. Our intention is to continue working very closely with this new government, help them make the changes, provide assistance in whatever we can to help the government move forward closer towards its goals. We believe that's what the citizens of Macedonia want, to see some progress, see the reforms necessary to bring a more prosperous and stable future.
There are dilemmas concerning the course of judicial reforms. Priebe is against general re-election. Can there be substantial changes even without general re-election of judges?
Well, I think that is a question that really is best answered by the experts on the ground and between the government and the European Union, which of course will be working very closely with government authorities on the kinds of standards, judicial standards, rule of law standards necessary for Macedonia to meet the European Union acquis for accession, which of course is a goal that we all share for Macedonia. But I will say that we believe it's very important for Macedonia to make those reforms to the judiciary that will allow the judiciary to be independent, to be free from political pressure, to be able to provide efficient and timely decisions that will establish a strong rule of law, that will reassure the citizens that rule of law is being respected, and that also businesses, so that businesses, whether they're foreign or they're domestic, will know that there's a business environment in which their businesses can come and succeed. So it's important not only for the citizens of Macedonia, for the country's future in acceding to the EU and also to NATO, but it's also important to those investors that will help the country reach the kind of economic standards, creation of jobs that are necessary to help encourage young people to stay in Macedonia and continue to contribute to its brighter future.
5 months after April 27th, and there is no progress in enlightening the violent events. 2.5 years have passed since wiretap scandal was made public, and there is no verdict for any of the cases that came out from this illegal interception of communication. How can someone expect for Macedonia to go forward without judicial ending of these cases, which is hardly possible without proper reform?
We believe it's very important for the country to establish accountability for the unauthorized wiretaps and for the alleged government abuses associated with those wiretaps. The establishment of accountability will be a critical step, we believe, towards Macedonia convincing the European Union, NATO, allies, and its other international partners that it's ready to join, to integrate with institutions, whether EU or NATO or other institutions. It's also an important step in reassuring the people of Macedonia that the rule of law is being established, it's been respected and strengthened. So we call on all actors, political parties, political leaders, government leaders, members of parliament, to do all they can to ensure that justice is done, the rule of law is observed, that the special prosecutor is given the support necessary to do its job, and that there is not political pressure, there's not political influence over the prosecutors, over the judges, those involved in establishing accountability. I agree it's important that this be done in a timely manner, that it not drag on for a long time. But I think it's also important to recognize that the government is still relatively new, that there has not been adequate cooperation in the past with the prosecution, and we hope very much that cooperation from all parties will be improved going forward.
What about Vumro Diplomane's role as opposition? The party has announced its intention to change the attitude towards Albanians and international community.
Well, we believe that any healthy democracy needs not only a strong government, but a strong opposition. And by that I mean an opposition that's going to play a constructive role, both in Parliament and outside, in not only blocking proposals that it does not agree with, but in proposing alternatives if it doesn't like what the government or other parties are proposing. This is a country, Macedonia, that is trying to advance its democratic transition and to advance its prospects for accession into the European Union and into NATO. That means that the country cannot afford the luxury of permanent delays, of obstruction by political parties who disagree with the government. Of course, it is their democratic right to use all tools at their disposal, legal tools, that is, according to parliamentary rules. However, again, the obligation of a responsible, constructive opposition is that it not only block proposals, but it proposes alternatives. So we look forward to Vumro, to all parties in Parliament, to play a constructive role, to seek compromises when there are disagreements. We'll be watching very closely. I think the European Union will as well. And for those parties or individuals who are clearly obstructing for the sake of obstructing or for personal or other intentions, we will hold them accountable.
Can Macedonia become 30th NATO member country, and in what time period is this possible to happen?
Well, one very important development, I think, that this new government has achieved is the strengthening of relations with neighbors, beginning with Bulgaria. And the Bulgaria-Macedonia friendship agreement, I think, was very significant in demonstrating the will of the new government to strengthen ties, to overcome past difficulties with neighbors, and to form new bridges of cooperation and of friendship with its neighbors in a way to strengthen stability of the region. We hope that will continue with other countries, including Greece, of course. We're very pleased to see that Macedonia and Greece have had some early contacts between the new government and the government of Greece. We encourage these contacts. We think it's important to have discussions between diplomats, between officials, about how to resolve past differences, how to move forward so that both governments can achieve what they're trying to achieve. One of the important goals they share, I think, is a closer relationship between the two countries and a more stable, prosperous region. So we look forward to increased engagement, continued work by both countries in finding a solution to the name issue under the mediation and assistance of UN Special Representative Matthew Nimitz. And we are optimistic that if both sides continue to operate with goodwill, looking for solutions, that it will be possible for Macedonia and Greece to find a solution to the name issue and for Macedonia to move forward with its goal of joining NATO.
Nikola Gruevski, in his public appearances, said that Zoran Zaev was put in power just to change the name of the country as Greece fashions it.
Well, I believe that Prime Minister Zaev became Prime Minister as a consequence of elections that took place in December that the international community deemed to be credible, to be legitimate, that he came to power after a lengthy process of negotiation among the parties in parliament that achieved a majority and therefore a coalition. I think that Prime Minister Zaev has made very clear that one of his goals is to bring the country closer to the European Union and to NATO. That, of course, will require good relations with its neighbors, including with Greece, and overcoming the name issue, as we just discussed. I don't believe that there is some kind of international interference or conspiracy that is behind all of this. I think it's the people of Macedonia, the citizens of Macedonia, who have, through the ballot, through the election in December, and the members of parliament now who form the coalition that are supporting Prime Minister Zaev and his reform agenda, that are aiming the country towards improved relations within the region, with neighbors, including with Greece, and finding a solution to the name issue that allow Macedonia to join NATO.
How real is Russian presence in Macedonia and in the region? This was one of the main points of Vice President Pence's speech in Podgorica.
Well, as Vice President Pence and President Trump and Secretary Tillerson have made clear, the United States will work with Russia whenever we have common ground, whenever we have common interests, for example, in the fight against terrorism. However, when our interests are not coinciding, when Russia is working against what we're trying to do, we will defend our interests and those of our allies and our partners. In the Balkans, we have seen, unfortunately, over the past year, Russian activities, malign influence, the worst case being in Montenegro, where Russia attempted to interfere with the elections, and probably much worse. We see Russia trying to discourage the accession of countries in the Western Balkans to NATO, also to the European Union. We believe it's very important, as a matter of principle, that countries in the Western Balkans or anywhere have the right to choose their own security alliances, have the right to choose their futures. And no country should have a veto. And that's the principle that we are defending in helping Macedonia, helping Montenegro, Bosnia-Herzegovina, other countries that wish to integrate even more closely with European and Euro-Atlantic institutions. It's important that Macedonia, working with us, working with the European Union and its partners in the region, continue to resist malign influence from whatever source it might be, that they continue to try to strengthen the independent media. It's important to have a strong, free, independent, professional media to resist misinformation from Russia or from other sources. It's very important also that Macedonia and other countries in the region attempt to increase their energy diversification, so they're not dependent on a single source of gas or other energy from any one country, whether that's Russia or any other country. We think it's also a matter of interest for the United States and countries in Europe, for all of those countries which are trying to join NATO and the European Union to be less dependent on Russia for equipment, military equipment or weapons, or spare parts, so that they're not vulnerable to pressure from Russia through that avenue. This is not to say that we're opposed to Russia having a role in Europe. Of course, Russia will always have a role in Europe. Russia has interests, legitimate interests in Europe. However, what is dangerous in our view is an overdependence on Russia, either for energy or military equipment, and also a vulnerability, whether it's in Macedonia or other countries in the Western Balkans, to malign influence, whether that's misinformation, cyber attacks, hybrid warfare. We need together, the United States, European Union, countries which are trying to join NATO and the EU, we need to continue working together to build resilience against these threats, and to, as soon as possible, welcome Macedonia and other Western Balkan countries that wish to welcome them into the European Union and NATO, where they'll be stronger and more stable and more prosperous.
Mr. Yi, thank you for this interview for today's edition of 360 Degrees.
Thank you very much, and I hope to see you next time I'm in Skopje.